Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beyond Games, the YouTube channel all about what's next for gaming. I'm Jon Jordan, and I'm very pleased today to be joined by Philip Oliver. How's it going, Philip?
Good, John. Thank you.
Good. So I'm going to do a bit of an introduction because that sets the scene for kind of a little bit kind of why we're talking to you and what we're going to be talking about. But you have been making games for an extremely long period of time. I think I've seen 200 games in total that you and your brother, your twin brother Andrew, have worked on. Starting in 1983, you have in the Guinness Book of Records apparently for the most prolific 18-bit developers, which is something. 26 titles released, 35 designed. At one point, you were accounted for 7% of UK game sales. I don't know if that's how true that is. But
actually, at one
seems
point,
about right.
it was over just for 1 month. It touched over 15%. But the press release went out when it was 7%.
Oh, I see. That's where that one comes in. We need to change Wikipedia. So basically, you have been making games for as long as probably longer than most of the people watching this podcast, videocast have been alive, and you've seen pretty much everything. And I thought that would be good. In Beyond Games, we're kind of thinking about where games are going and how games interact with society and wider kind of digital economies and kind of entertainment. And I kind of think it's good to talk to these people who've seen many different things. And you've made more games than many people have played games. So, as an opening question, I guess, when you were you started in 1983. You were, I guess, in your bedrooms, kind of making these games. Dizzy, I guess, is the famous sort of game from that era. And then you progress through the various different consoles and PCs. At what point did you sort of twig that this wasn't just kind of a sort of a hobby thing you were doing, and obviously you were successful at it very early on and making money, but at what point did you kind of think this is actually, a thing, culturally it's a thing, it's financially it's a thing, it's, this is something that sort of is a career? Did that come quite quickly or?
Very early. So I'd actually say that Andrew and I first became aware of kind of computer games and entertainment with pretty much the regular Pong machine, but it was a rip-off. It was kind of under the TV. Yeah. I think it was Christmas 79. Our parents got it for us. Might have been Christmas 80, not sure. Yeah. But it was like a rip-off. Put it under the TV, just a bat and ball Pong. Very, very basic. That's not when we suddenly thought this is going to rock the world. But that was when it was like, hey, this is really interesting that you can actually control the picture on the TV. A year later, our brother got a ZX81, plugged it in under the TV. So obviously, everybody only had one big TV, sort of, well, I say big. It was an okay size in the living room.
It was fat, very fat.
And very fat, obviously, and very heavy. And that was plugged in, and we found it absolutely fascinating that now, rather than just being able to sort of move the paddles up and down, and that you could actually type some code and actually get it to do a little bit of logic. But we learned very, very quickly. I mean, we must have been about 13, 14 at that point. We learned very quickly how limiting as the computer was. And we learnt the need for more RAM because it had 1K of RAM. So that's 1,000 characters.
Oh, I've got this. Look at this. 16K RAM pack.
Oh,
there we are, the 16K.
That was enormous.
That was incredible, wasn't it?
That felt like it was enormous. Anyway, and you had a paper keyboard and no sound, and it was a black and white display, and it was something like only 60 pixels across the screen or something. So you could basically do the resolution of a Pong. It was all pretty rubbish. But what we did actually learn from that was that computers were exciting, and we actually understood all the terms. We understand what we did need. So what we learned from a ZX81 was we needed a better computer, but we knew what to look for. So we saved up lots of money to buy a Dragon 32. A Dragon 32 had 32K of RAM. It had color computing. It had, I think it was 200 pixels wide or something, by 192 or something like that. 240 by 192. 16 colours, proper keyboard, still cassette based. But at that point, we were actually able to sort of start writing little games. And the game that had inspired us was Pac-Man. We really loved Pac-Man. A friend of ours had a rip-off copy of Pac-Man on his dad's Apple II computer. I think they call it Taxman. And we used to sort of play that. It was kind of a black and white on his dad's kind of work computer. And so we basically kept trying to recreate Pac-Man over the years kind of thing, but in the early days. But we were trying to do this with BASIC. I mean, the good thing about those computers were you turned them on and you had a cursor, flashing cursor on BASIC in front of you and a little manual. So that encouraged us to learn to program. I'd actually say, to answer your question, it was probably at about that point that we thought, wait a minute, if you've just gone from black and white, low res, sort of no sound, to this in 1 year, think where it's going to go in the future. It's going to be, next year, it's going to be at least double the power, at least double the memory, at least double the resolution. The sound's going to get better. Wait a minute, you don't have to project that very far at all before you get something absolutely incredible. So I'd say that's the point when we thought this is an entertainment of the future. And although other people couldn't understand it, and although other people couldn't see it because it looked so rubbish on screen, quite frankly, we saw that it was going to be a huge form of entertainment. We didn't see where our role in it was at all. We just thought we're in on the ground, and we can see that this is going to be big. So let's just kind of play some more, make some more, learn some more, and develop our skills. In developing our skills, we ended up moving to a BBC Micro because it's twice the speed. In fact, it was more than twice the speed. It was an awesome computer. So we moved on to the BBC Micro in about 83. About 83 it was, got better at programming, started doing assembler code, or sort of machine code, as they called it back then. So you actually get arcade games and speed up. And then we moved on. We couldn't actually sell the games on that platform because it was such an expensive computer. It wasn't in a lot of households. It was in schools and stuff like that. And also the people who had BBC Micros knew how to pirate things really easily and really well. so it's quite hard to actually make money on that platform. But then the Amstrad came out in 84 and we started writing on the Amstrad because we actually figured we've learned the skills, we know how to make games, but now we need to become a bit more commercial about it. We need to actually make some money out of this. We couldn't make any money on BBC, so we moved to the Amstrad. On the Amstrad, by 85, we were getting really, really good and proficient. And it was in 86 we left school, were supposed to go to university, took a year out to sort of try to make a go of it and get it out of our systems, is what our head teacher said. From our point of view, it was never going to get out of our systems because we absolutely loved it and embraced. But I think at that point we knew that our future was in making video games. And we didn't want to go to university because there weren't university courses on making games. The idea of making games was just a hobby, a fad. It was not going anywhere kind of thing. But we knew at that point, in fact, a journalist, when we met Codemasters in September 86, they were just setting up. The first game that they published for us was Super Robin Hood. It went straight to number one on the Amstrad, and a journalist came round our house, just a sort of a local Wiltshire Times, I think it was, journalist. And he was talking to us, and as he was did the interview and the photographs, as he was leaving, he said, well, make the most of it, lads. But it's a good thing, make the most of it, because it's a passing fad. And we're like, what? It's like, you don't understand. This is not a passing fad. This is going to take over from TV and films. This will be bigger than TV and films in the future. And he'd just seen Super Robin Hood on an Amstrad.
Of course.
He just laughed and kept walking, which was a bit of a shame, but we'd just sort of said that, in fact, I think the line we came out with added to, this will be bigger than TV and films. Imagine the day when you are James Bond, you make all the decisions and it looks as good, if not better, than a James Bond movie. And that's what we said to him. He laughed, he walked away. Shame he didn't write it. I know his name actually. Trevor Porter.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it would be brilliant. I've met him since, and he did remember we'd said it, but he never wrote it, which was a bit of a shame.
That's the headline, isn't it? I mean, that's the local
but I guess at that point, at that point, we were making the prediction of how big it would be, and we sort of did nail it. And actually, I would say that what we didn't nail and what we didn't understand is we were only thinking single player. We were thinking kind of offline. We had no concept back in, so this was 86. We had no concept of what the internet was or what it would do. Didn't know, it kind of didn't really exist. And of course,
it didn't, did it?
That has changed everything. So I would say our prediction only went as far as about early 2000, because that's when you had a decent PlayStation James Bond game or something where it's like, actually this looks pretty good, and actually I'm in control. But obviously the internet changed it, like gave you a massive boost of what was possible. First of all, in terms of connectivity and multiplayer games. But then, as you go into the late 2000s, you've got the ability to download software and distribute software, which changes the business equation behind the scenes so much, and the development terms so much. You always had to just master a game, put it out there, duplicate as many as you're going to, and it was a kind of a fire and forget, as they say. But when you got into digital distribution, it means you can put something out and then iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate. It also means you can serve lots of different people with lots of diverse content, not having to worry about a minimum threshold of a minimum number of units to duplicate, or worried about getting it into stores and everything else. And then, of course, you've got the next thing we didn't see coming, and that was everything becoming free, and games becoming... Well, it's not a bad thing. I mean, we were always for wanting to get our entertainment into people's hands, as long as it kind of paid the bills. And actually, with the Codemasters philosophy, where we obviously had our huge sort of early successes, they had the philosophy that they told us. This is the Darling brothers who set Codemasters up. They said you could sell games for £10 each, cassettes for £10 each. Or you could sell 4 or 5 times the number of cassettes at £2 each and make the same money. What would you rather do? And we go, well, we'd rather sell them at the lower price, make the same money, and more people enjoy our entertainment. So effectively, the freemium model just pushes that even further in that direction. It's
absolutely.
Anyway, sorry, incredibly long answer for you there, Jon.
That's good. No, you covered the history of computer games there, which is kind of good. So it was interesting. I guess with when you're kind of starting out, there's some sort of bravado around kind of what you thought games were going to be, but you've kind of proven true, at least in the sense that games have now sort of, I guess, surpassed the visual quality of films in many respects. But it's kind of interesting. So I guess one of the kind of things I feel like sometimes it's like the we're at the Oscars and you're getting your Lifetime Achievement Award, which basically means you're not going to make any more films. But you guys are still, you and your brother are still very active. I know you can't talk too much about it, but you're obviously thinking, having gone through various kind of gone through kind of PC and then you've done console games and done mobile games. And so for you, when you think about sort of the future of games, you don't have to talk specifically about what you're doing next, because I know that you're going to launch that kind of later on in the year. But what kind of areas do you think are the kind of the what we call it, the kind of the blue ocean or the blue sky kind of areas for games?
So the interesting thing is that it always used to be about the hardware. So I can relate it back to the early computers very easily. The amount of RAM, the amount of speed, the amount of the storage medium, and whereas in recent years, everybody likes the fact that a PlayStation 2 is faster than a PlayStation 1 and a PlayStation 3 is faster than and it's got more memory and it's got more... But we're now at a point where everything's kind of going to the cloud. So the amount of storage you have and the size of the game is kind of variable. It doesn't really... You don't have to say, does my computer have twice as much RAM as the one before, or twice as much ROM, or twice as much like storage, or twice, because it's all in the cloud, and if it needs some more, it will just go and grab it. I mean, quite often it just streams in the extra data it needs when it needs it, and quite often you can launch a game with not having a lot of the content there, and the content comes along afterwards. And the speed is currently fixed in consoles and currently fixed on phones, but again, that's a moving target. But also, they're so phenomenally fast. I mean, graphic processors these days are just insane. So effectively, even if you've got a slow processor, you're getting an amazing picture. But if somebody wants to buy a faster processor, a slightly newer machine, they just get a slightly higher resolution. And it's like, but I have to say, we are getting to the point of our eyes are the limiting factor, not the screens. So effectively, the hardware used to be the limiting factor. Now it's the creativity and that is the sort of limiting factor. But also, what you can do with the amount of sort of software and ideas and technologies that are out there. Now, a few years ago, people always used to make their own graphic engine. And then basically Epic and Unity and people sort of took over with the Unreal Engine and stuff. And you don't worry about that kind of stuff anymore. And I think the future is using everybody else's technologies and combining them all together to create new, interesting, interactive experiences. And I say interactive. I think the bit that we understood when we were sort of at school and teenagers is why are games more like, why do we see such a future? Why do we see that it could? Because interactive means no limits. Whereas when you look at TV or film, you have a limit. It is a fixed story. It is fixed visuals. It's fixed everything. Whereas interactive is not fixed anything. It's like, and because it's not fixed, it's much more personal to you. It's much more engaging to you. You make decisions. You mentally invest in it, and your investment makes it now a personal experience. Being a personal experience means you are more engaged. And I guess we saw that even through crappy graphics and very limited. Whereas you don't have the crappy graphics or the crappy sound anymore. It's like, but you do have the interactivity where everything is now being personalised to you and you've got the personal investment back in it. And of course, everything's online, which means it can be a single player experience, but it can be a group thing as well. And obviously Fortnite being massive and the battle royale kind of genre being enormous is because it's you against like 99 other people. And that's what's so important about that genre. So that was a long answer, but in conclusion, the new and exciting future is using all the software and the ideas and the creativity and the technologies and putting them all together and not worrying too much about the hardware. It's like the hardware is no longer the challenge. It's the creativity is the challenge.
Yeah, no, it's kind of irrelevant. No, I think it's I mean, I guess we've seen the rise of sort of user-generated kind of content in general. I mean, kind of, I guess, ironically, back in the day, you know, the user-generated content was kind of you put on your computer and had to type something. You had to type the game in. That was sort of user-generated content in the kind of one scale. That's what you did as a game developer. But I guess what's interesting now is the lines between kind of consumers of games and makers of games is very much blurred. You know, if you're in Minecraft, you're effectively making. You know,
you're making and you're playing at the same time, and you sort of need to blend the experience. And actually, I mean, I would say that Minecraft was a massive turning point for the industry. I mean, look how consuming it was to the mass market, Minecraft, and although it had crappy graphics, it really did. It doesn't matter because it wasn't about that. And I think it was a big turning point in showing a new way in which people can be entertained. And I have to say, it's clearly resonated with us, we've obviously gone on to do things that may have been slightly inspired. Well, I've got a little biscuit tin here. It's now a pen tin, obviously. It was a massive turning point and inspiration for many, actually. I mean, one thing that was good about Minecraft is how much it made gaming and being a creator much more normal thing. I mean, I know the government and education and everybody always thinks it's very important to get more people into IT, definitely. And you need to inspire. If you want somebody to learn something, you need to inspire them first. Minecraft did that. It's like it inspired them first to enjoy technology and this creativity and all this, and then take it through. And I'm sure that in the future, at the moment, the industry is full of people who grew up on a BBC and stuff like that. They inspired them. I think the next generation will be full of people who say, I got into IT, computers, programming and everything because of Minecraft. And I think that's really important. I think it's massive.
So it's sort of in this context, I'm going to throw a word at you and see what you think of it. It's kind of a word that we throw around a lot, kind of beyond games. We don't quite know what it means. I don't think anyone knows what it means. But when I say metaverse, what does that mean? Do you think that is just sort of a
Ready Player One? Ready Player One.
Yeah, I know, but that's what we use. But I mean, is that when we think about where gaming's going? Is that a useful term, or is that just sort of something we'll look back in sort of 10 years time ago? That was some silly.
It's like our what was the multimedia? They used to sort of say years ago and banded it around, and then after a while, it was
the
stop saying
information
that.
superhighway.
Stop saying that.
There's all these weird tech terms that seem cool at the time, and then
so obviously the metaverse. I mean, it is sort of Ready Player One. That's how I picture it, and it is kind of starting to live inside these virtual worlds that have been created partly by big corporations, because let's be honest, these are expensive places to make, but also partly created by the community themselves, populating it and bringing it to life with their presence and with their creativity and gameplay and everything else. So I think it's kind of got a massive future. I kind of agree. I can't help thinking Wall-E. That is one downside of it. That people spend too much time. In fact, in Ready Player One, people spend too much time inside it. So I think it's got its worries and concerns, but it's a bit like AI has got its worries and concerns when you kind of watch Terminator. It's like, ooh, I'm not sure I like where this is going. But we, the programmers, are still in control at the moment. So hopefully it's okay.
I mean, I guess. I mean, I'm going to say, I sort of wonder that, I think, if the term metaverse does be sort of stay with us, and it is because it's very elastic. So, you could see, obviously, people would argue at the moment something like, Fortnite is, is sort of the best.
It's the closest. It's the close we have at the moment.
But equally, we have things like, you could argue, kind of any persistent online world. You could argue, World of Warcraft was the first sort of.
I was just gonna reference World of Warcraft. When I first saw that, it's like, oh my god, this is amazing. And probably if I look at it now, I wouldn't be so impressed. But but the concept of a persistent online world. I mean, yes. I mean, that's almost a good definition of a persistent online world, but obviously we expect these days for it to be graphically very rich and for it to contain a lot of people doing a lot of different things.
I guess probably the dividing line between something like a Fortnite, and it may morph into this to what maybe other people think of as a metaverse, is something where you spend a lot of time, which people do spend in games, but then it has some aspects of what we would call now the real world in that. So it may be I don't know if you had a banking system in there, or you could
I was thinking
having,
that
you'd have Facebook in there, or you'd have those things that would currently be kind of separate systems outside, that everything would be lumped in together. Now obviously the more things you lump in, the more complicated it becomes from a system point of view, so it probably becomes a bad experience. So maybe that's why we won't have Ready Player One, because it's just so incredibly complicated to build all that together. And probably some people
you say
like Facebook.
You say that, but I mean you're obviously beyond games, and at the moment the metaverse is only kind of really considering the games themselves and a type of experience and a type of customer. But just as we have web pages with amazing different content inside web pages, then surely the best metaverse is one where lots of people can input lots of different things, and it's not just let's just shoot everybody. It could be there's a shopping precinct over there, there's a banking system over there, there's a tourist information over there, and effectively and this is the one thing I find so exciting, and this is one of the reasons why I don't stop put my feet up and go, okay, I'm done. It's like, because it may not be possible. It may not be possible this year. It may not be possible in 5 years. But you know what? 10 years, 15 years? Kind of all of these things, because the acceleration of technology is exponential. It's just incredible. So at the moment, you're going, oh, well, that'll actually be pretty difficult from a technical point of view. Anytime you say that, it's just a matter of time, mate. It's like it's coming. It's like if there's a need for it, if the consumer would like it, it will come eventually. It's just when.
Do you think VR stroke AR? I mean, often the Metaverse and obviously Ready Player One, people put things on. Do you think that's a component part? Because it hasn't. It's something that I think I can kind of see. Kind of why it's important. I quite like doing some VR stuff, but it clearly hasn't, as you just said there, clearly hasn't made the jump to something that the mass market goes.
It's taking longer than expected. I mean, I think AR and VR are two very different things. Let's just talk about VR first. I think it's coming. It's just taking a lot longer. I think people underestimated the enormity of the task at hand. They thought that 1080p cameras, screens on each eye was enough. They thought that 75 frames a second was enough. They thought the lag, whatever sort of the lag of detection of your movement would be enough. But they actually discovered very quickly that actually it's nowhere near enough, but also you've actually got the added problems of batteries and the weight of the devices and just so many other things. Each time they sort of said, oh, well, where we need to get to is here, they got to there and then realised it's still not mass market. It's still not kind of good enough. Now, at the moment, I'd actually say that with the Oculus 2, we've actually got to a point where we're sort of at the Nintendo 8-bit, which is like, it's kind of fun and some people will really enjoy it, but I suppose even not even Nintendo 8-bit, because actually that became quite mass market in America. Yes. So we're probably not quite there yet, but we're getting close, I think. I think we need to keep increasing screen resolution, reducing lag, reducing weight, putting more content that works. The one thing that not slightly annoys me, I think it's very irritating, is you need the ability to get completely consumed in the experience, but then within a split second be able to come out of the experience. I would just like to just touch the side and bang, you're just seeing clear through. So that if somebody walks into the room, you can just go tap and bang, you're just back in the room. Not rip it off and go, what the hell's going on? And the other thing I think would be quite useful in these things is to actually have a mode of actually detecting what is around you. And the Oculus starts to try to do this in a very rudimentary form, and it will get better, of actually detecting what is around you when you are in that experience. Now, obviously, they have the kind of, it detects a bit of furniture or a chair or something, but it's not too good at detecting your dog coming into the picture. And your dog, if you're playing Beat Saber, my dog has to watch out. But I think it'd be quite nice that if you are sitting there and somebody came into the room and they're off to the left, so it's got to have quite wide, that it actually detects and tells you somebody's just come into the room, somebody's just stood up, somebody's just, so that actually you feel, when you're in those experiences, you're always wondering what's happening in the real world, and you need to kind of be reassured it's not going to be a problem. It's like, and at the moment, you've always, when you're in the experience, are always thinking, what is actually happening in the real world? Is it all right? Is it fine? And I just think a little bit of extra detection to sort of bring you out of that experience, or maybe ghost people in. If somebody moves, ghosts them in, and you go, oh, right, somebody's actually walking towards me. So they ghost them in. It's like, oh, come out of the experience. Hello, yes, what do you want? Right, okay, back into the experience. And I think some of those, and obviously just dropping the weight and dropping the thing so that it's actually nicer to use. And of course, I think one of the biggest issues, so I get to the AR. At the moment, you've got a problem that you've got many, many different devices. So you've got the developers wondering, which device do we code for? Which interface do we make this for? Oculus can now do the hand recognition thing, but then other people have got different types of controllers with different types of buttons and all this. It makes it very confusing, having all these different input methods, for the developers as to which input methods do we work on, which technical spec do we go for. So all of that needs to be sort of cleaned up as much as possible so it's easier. But then, of course, both developers and consumers have an issue of AR and VR are currently two completely separate beasts. And actually, I think the technology needs to sort of improve on both of them so they kind of merge together. And at some point when they merge together and somebody says, I've actually got a pair of glasses which actually are good enough, they can be good AR, they can be good enough to be good VR, then it's the consumer doesn't have to choose. It's like, well, I know it's that one now that I need. And also, it means that some of the experiences can actually flit from one to the other and use what it needs.
Best of both.
I remember back in the days of 16-bit, I'm trying to think, it was the days of GoldenEye, where you basically have N64, where basically when you started designing a game, you had to make a decision: are you first person or third person? You cannot be a video game that is both. And me and Andrew, we argued with our developers. We had developers at the time going, well, that's crazy. We want to just put that on a button. No, that will never work. Nobody will ever do that. And we were going, but that's what we want. We don't want to have to design a game which is one or other. We want to let the user decide that. And I think that if we can combine AR and VR nicely, then the consumer doesn't have to choose at the point of sale, but also the developer can say, well, I'm going to give you an experience where you've actually got a few choices that you can make yourself. And I think that'll be exciting. I think that will really help make it go mass market. I think we have got to a point where it's now pretty good, but it's not the mass market yet. But it's getting there. And all of these things, they'll get there.
Yeah. Maybe it's the one area still where sort of hardware hasn't got to the stage of being sort of commoditized yet. It's got to, I guess it'd be interesting.
There is an interesting thing that I see, that when you've got all this serving cloud games through things like the Stadia or the xCloud, that actually consoles are less important. It's your sort of screen that is more important. And so I can almost see a time, I'm going to make a horrible prediction here. Well, I remember making a prediction once about consoles, Xbox and PlayStation, not needing disk drives, and I got in a load of good grief about that. Just saying, well, why can't they just be digital? This must have been about the time of PlayStation 3, I think it was, because obviously the iPhone had come out and it was a completely digital download platform. And I just sort of said, if somebody wants to buy it as an accessory and bolt it on a disk drive, then that's fine, but we don't need to sell the base unit with... Anyway, so I'll make another horrible prediction, and that is that if stuff does go towards a streaming world, then then what is the next PlayStation or the PlayStation plus one sort of thing? Well, actually, it actually almost needs to be those glasses rather than the console that sits under the TV. So I kind of think that it needs to go in that direction. The other interesting thing that's going to really help AR and VR and all these things take off is that if you can just stream directly into them. With the Stadia type technology, because that has a few advantages. It takes a lot of the processing out of that headset, which drops the weight and drops the cost and everything else. But it also means that you can serve different devices a lot easier. So at the moment, like I said, the developers are trying to work out exactly, am I programming for the Oculus or am I programming for this one or that one, but all the different variations. When you start streaming, and if you can kind of have almost, not completely standardized formats, but standardize as much as you possibly can, then you can have one experience served out to different devices on a streaming type service. I think that will help.
Well, I guess the interesting kind of release that we know is sort of coming at some point will be the Apple AR glasses, which I think we're thinking probably next year maybe. I mean, because Apple would clearly.
I was going to say they keep rumouring all of these things, but they've been rumouring it for the last 4 or 5 years, haven't they? It's
maybe there's
almost given up waiting.
Maybe there's a big room that says Apple AR department, you open the door, there's nothing in there, and they're just going to keep rumouring it till forever and ever.
I mean, Apple. I do love the fact that these technology companies have these grand ambitions, and people like Apple have got so much money in the R&D that we need them to pursue these, to sort of open the doors, because it is such a massive investment to get this technology down to a consumer price that we can kind of make it mass market, so that there is a huge market for people to then produce the software for. So we kind of need them to do it, and we need the Sonys and the Microsofts and the Apples to sort of push that technology. And Google.
Absolutely. Lovely. Well, we've covered a lot of ground there. I think that's probably enough for today. We may kind of come back and do another one when you're talking more about your new project called Panivox. So maybe later in the year, but we'll hold off on that. But thank you very much, Philip. That was brilliant. We covered a lot of ground, and I think a lot of food for thought for people.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
And thanks to you for watching the video. This is Beyond Games, where we are taking a look at what's happening next for games and how games are kind of flowing out into the world and changing the world, and trying to talk to some of the kind of the visionaries who are kind of building this kind of Beyond Games kind of world, the Metaverse, whatever term you want to use. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and see you again soon.
Cheers.